Welcome to this week's edition of Ask Welcome to this week's edition of Ask an MS Expert. I'm John Strum, and I'm the host of the Real Talk MS podcast. Each week, Real Talk MS reaches thousands of people in more than 100 countries around the world with the news that people affected by MS need to know. My wife, Jean, lived with progressive MS for 23 years, so I've had a front row seat experiencing all the ways that MS can impact a family. I'm a past member of the International Progressive MS Alliance Scientific Steering Committee. Currently, I serve on the MS Society's Community Review of MS Research Committee. I'm a district activist leader and trustee for the National MS Society, and I chair the Society's California Government Relations Advisory Committee. The MS Society's Ask an MS Expert webcast is designed to give us a place for the MS community to connect and to connect you with experts who are ready to answer your questions on the topics that impact people affected by MS every day. Please feel free to post your comments and questions on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitch. MS navigators are online throughout today's program, answering those questions, connecting you to resources. Navigating the doctor-patient relationship as a true partnership requires mutual effort and open, honest communication. But communicating effectively with your healthcare provider and making informed decisions about your care can sometimes be challenging. And those challenges can quickly multiply when someone is faced with language or cultural barriers. Dr. Luis Manrique-Trujillo joins us today to explore ways to enhance communication, bridge cultural gaps, and empower you to engage more effectively with your healthcare provider. Dr. Manrique is a neurologist specializing in neuroimmunology and multiple sclerosis at MedStar Georgetown University Hospital in Washington, D.C. Welcome, Dr. Manrique, and thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for inviting me, John. It's a pleasure to be here today.
Most situations in life benefit from clear, open communication. So when it comes to preparing for an upcoming appointment with your healthcare provider, what's the best way to ensure that all your concerns are heard and your expectations are met?
The first thing you have to keep in mind is probably when you are going to meet them for the first time, or even if you're meeting them in follow-up visits, is you are going to establish a long-term patient-physician relationship. MS is a long-term disease, a chronic disease, and you're gonna be meeting them several times. So you want to start that communication process in the best terms possible. That goes with providing accurate information, being completely transparent about all the questions as essential points to start with. I think that you can help to improve this communication by listing ahead of time your concerns and your top priorities to discuss. For example, probably you can start by telling them what's the main purpose of the visit right away. If you're starting with a first counter, say, for instance, my primary care doctor sent me here, or I would like a second opinion from you, or I'm transferring care to you. That all of those sentences might be important in a first encounter, so they know what's the reason why you're there. In follow-up encounters, probably you want to keep your list realistic and maybe prioritize those symptoms that are mostly bothersome, and then try to schedule an appointment sooner if there are some points that you would like to continue to discuss. Regarding the expectations you should set is very important, as I was mentioning, that you talk to your provider about what's coming up in the short term, what's the plan going forward, and making sure that you really understand what are gonna be what is the order of the next steps you should follow.
Eric told us that he's naturally soft-spoken, so he worries about not being listened to during his medical appointments. Are there specific steps that Eric can take to become a stronger communicator with his MS care team?
So we find patients like Eric very frequently. I would like to tell him that he's not alone, that many patients struggle with the volume of their voice. Also, this applies to other patients that have speech difficulties, word finding difficulties, which is very common with MS, and actually patients that have cognitive issues or attention deficits as well can really struggle to communicate with their providers. So for Eric, there is a couple of advices. So the first thing is that probably writing ahead of time what he would like to discuss might be really helpful. Is very important that as I was mentioning before, he prioritize what he would like to talk about with the provider, but also that will help the provider to maybe read what he's trying to express, and the volume of his voice is not gonna be a big issue. And then there is something else that Eric can do about it, is that he can bring a support person who is someone who knows him very well. So it can be a family member or a friend, and someone that he trusts, and then this person can actually help him to organize his thoughts and concerns, and maybe tell the provider about what they have witnessed before in terms of Eric's symptoms. So those are actions that can be really helpful. From a provider standpoint, we may need to ask him to repeat the questions or repeat his concerns, and that's okay. Is okay, even if he might have some questions about what we say, probably we can repeat as well. And I just want to reassure Eric that there is no issue with that. We have to repeat some of the information.
It's important that someone feel confident that their healthcare provider is fully qualified to treat their MS. Are there specific qualifications to look for? What's the best way to find a healthcare provider with expertise in MS?
That's a very good question, Eric, and I feel like many patients with multiple sclerosis have a struggle to find such a person, and it can be very challenging. There are many general neurologists out there who have plenty of experience over the years treating patients, but there is also multiple sclerosis and neuroimmunology trained neurologists who dedicated part of their training to see mainly MS patients. And that's the kind of provider that ideally you may want to find. I think that staying with the local neurologist but might be very convenient, and there are so many of them who are very good. But if for some reason, either whether you want to stay with them or not, you may find yourself with some questions about the near future or the long-term plan. So if that happens, I advise the audience to seek a second opinion with an MS specialist. As I said, this might be only one-time encounter, and then you may go back to your local neurologist, but you may stay with the MS experts if geographically is convenient for you. So to do that, the National MS Society is a very good resource. I have had several patients finding really great providers through the National MS Society. And also you may consult, for instance, the healthcare network that is nearby to you, and when you try to scroll down in the different neurologists that come up with your search, oftentimes you will find that they do have expertise in neuroimmunological conditions or multiple sclerosis. So if they list that as one of their expertise, you may need to call the office and make sure that they see multiple sclerosis patients. Oftentimes prefer to send them to one of the providers that work in the office, and at the same time, if you go to their office and you start talking to them, you may get a sense of how experts they are in the topic. Additionally, I would like to mention that there are some MS comprehensive centers that might be closer than you think, and you may need to Google them or talk to your primary care provider, because they oftentimes have the resources to find an MS comprehensive center. And what that means is that usually there are other providers other than neurology providers, such as physical medicine and rehabilitation, urologists, physical occupational therapists that work in those centers, and it might be helpful for you to be evaluated in one of those to have a comprehensive care.
MS symptoms and severity can differ from one individual to the next. So, what's the best way for someone to live with the varied and unpredictable nature of MS? And how does a healthcare provider approach the many diverse aspects of multiple sclerosis?
Multiple sclerosis has so many faces, as you were mentioning. I think that it will be virtually impossible to cover all of these symptoms in the short time that we have for an appointment. I think that it takes some expertise to prioritize which one of those symptoms we can address in each encounter. Hence, the importance of communicating very well with your provider and letting them know what you think could be the worst at the moment they are evaluating. So to give you some of the symptoms that patients live with, the most common ones are muscle weakness, numbness, tingling, visual abnormalities, balance loss, and bladder issues. I can go all the way towards cognitive speech difficulties, mood disorders, neuropathic pain, bowel issues as well. So some of these topics can be even difficult to talk to. So you need to trust your provider as well, build that trust, knowing that they want the best for you. And in the long term, actually, some of these symptoms can become progressive, meaning that they may be fluctuating, like they may worsen with time. So when that happens, that I would say that it's very likely you will need an MX expert that can address all of these issues in possible hundreds of patients that they have seen, because it's someone that doesn't have enough experience with MS patients might get tricked thinking that the symptoms are coming from from a different condition, and it's important that we make sure that they are not coming from multiple sclerosis.
Toby says that he's interested in getting a second opinion regarding his treatment options, but he's worried that seeking a second opinion might negatively affect his relationship with his current doctor. What's the best way for Toby to navigate this kind of a situation?
The first step for Toby will be telling them upfront what his concerns are. As I was saying, many general neurologists don't have enough experience in patients with multiple sclerosis, so Toby might find that actually his local neurologist is not as experienced and comfortable seeing these patients. I I I don't foresee any provider getting mad at Toby or taking actions about a second opinion. I feel like it's always good to hear a second a second brain thinking about your patient, but you may find some providers that might be a little bit jealous about their patients. So I think that it's definitely better to let them know. And when you do, and when Toby does that, probably you should tell this provider what they are uncomfortable with, or why they are looking at second opinion for, or I will just say, if it is regarding the diagnosis or the treatment, that this is a chronic disease they're gonna be living with their entire lives, and that they just want a second pair of eyes to look at them. And I feel like anyone in their shoes, if the provider puts themselves in Toby's shoes, I will understand perfectly the reason to get a second opinions. As I mentioned before, I encourage all the patients to have second opinions, even if they are seeing an M expert. Sometimes that happens. We see that in the office all the time. Like they go and look and see another provider and make sure that we are in the right track, and that's definitely okay with this type of chronic conditions.
When they're talking with their healthcare provider, are there steps that someone can take to make those conversations more collaborative and ensure that their voices are heard so that all the elements of their treatment plan are truly the result of shared decision making?
So this gets me to call all of our patients and tell them that they should be working with someone that has a patient-centered model. I feel like there are so many doctors in the country that are still they're still having a paternalistic model. So when we talk about paternalistic, we mean that the provider will tell you what to do, and the patient should just follow what they say. And in a patient-centered model, I think that this long-term relationship will work better. In general, as MS providers, we appreciate patients who ask questions and keep curious about their disease, because we know that those are main motivators that will down the road will drive the compliance with different therapies and the long-term plan. So I think that if we make sure that if the patients keep asking questions and we make sure to keep getting back to them and keeping them in our thought process, we might be able to take better decisions. We call this a shared decision-making process, because it has to be, the patient has to add some of these steps of the plan, and we need to focus on what's important to them. So to give an example, if I have a patient that is telling me that they are scared of adverse effects of medications we're using for symptomatic management, I will definitely just use the least amount of medications, since I know they are scared of developing side effects. Or in the other hand, if the patient tells me that they like alternative medications, I take that into account. Even though I don't know how to prescribe alternative medications, I will keep up with what they think is the best for them. Maybe we'll try to add a disease-modifying therapy, since we know that it prevents relapses. But I will work with them, and of course the family members, because they are essential in this process. And we also want to make sure that we hear their voices. So sometimes family members or friends are very important. So the method of active listening and questioning and active questioning most of the times work very well.
Not everyone speaks English as their primary language. So, for individuals for whom English is a second language, how can they best address potential communication barriers when they're speaking with members of their MS care team?
That is an excellent question, John. And that's probably contributing to so many healthcare disparities we're seeing. Multiple sclerosis is one of those chronic diseases when we are seeing higher rates of disability and even mortality in minority patients. So addressing these barriers is essential. We really need to work in improving the network of official translators for all the patients that we have, regardless of their origin or the language they speak. I think that having the approach to include diverse population in our offices will help us to understand better what are those cultural factors that drive some of the decisions that they take. Um, I I really encourage most of our patients and providers to try to obtain these cultural competencies that will help us to address healthcare disparities.
Natalia tells us that her healthcare provider doesn't speak her primary language, but offers written materials in her primary language. And Natalia is worried that she could end up receiving outdated information that was printed perhaps long ago. What online resources that provide current and reliable information about her MS diagnosis would you recommend for someone like Natalia?
I think that having well-informed patients is very important for us. We don't want them to go to Dr. Google because it can be very mean sometimes and it can give you wrong information. So the National MS Society website has a lot of educational resources that are very helpful. And not only that, the resources not only talk about the disease, the diagnosis, the therapies that we have, they also have patient services and different resources to live with the disease. So if you have not visited the website yet, I will strongly encourage you to do that. There are other websites that have very high quality information as well. One of them is called Can Do MS, and it does have a very simple language to explain what the disease is, what are the therapies, and some of the common symptoms that patients with MS experience. So that's another good resource. And the third resource I would like to recommend is the Multiple Sclerosis Foundation website. It does have very good resources in terms of education, but also has a part of the website that is called MS Community as MS Focus. And then what it helps you with is that it will connect you with navigators in your area, and it will help the families as well to learn about MS. So those three resources are very good, and I will invite everyone to visit them.
Cultural differences can sometimes create barriers to trust between people from different cultures. How can someone best establish trust with their healthcare provider in situations where cultural differences may exist between them?
So this question helps me to amplify more about the cultural competence. And what that means actually is that we understand this concept actually as the ability to collaborate effectually with individuals from different cultures. And such competence takes some experience. What I mean with that is sharing and seeing patients from those cultures is probably the gold standard for you to be able to work with them, because as long as you have not shared with them it can be the office setting, or maybe it can be outside the office. If you have not seen how they live, what are their values, their cultural beliefs, it will be hard for you to understand some of the things that they decide and some of their behaviors. So I think that this is something that the United States needs to work better on, and it's a little bit different than just working in diversity and inclusion. This might take some time, and some of the patients actually talk about a related topic to cultural competence in terms of saying, "Oh, I really like to see someone who looks like me, who speaks like me." What I will say is that, you know, many providers that maybe they don't look like you or they speak like you, they might be able to understand your culture. So probably what you want to find is someone that is able to understand and share some of your cultural values. And that way you might feel more comfortable talking to them about things like perceptions of illness and the reasons why you take decisions regarding your health. So I think it's essential for us to keep working on improving the cultural competencies.
At the end of an appointment, there may not be anything more important than feeling like your concerns have been heard and addressed by your healthcare team. So thank you for sharing some really valuable insights that can make that a smoother process. Let me ask you, what would you say are the top 3 takeaways that you'd like our viewers to remember?
The first takeaway I would say is the long-term relationship with your provider. You need to think about it like a long-term. Once you have chosen someone, it's gonna be down the road. It's gonna be essential to keep an open communication with them and make sure that it's someone that is responsive, that validates your cultural values and your emotions. The second takeaway is think about how your provider is addressing the issues that you are bringing up. And when you think about the way they are doing it, think if they are centering on you as a patient. So having someone who is patient-centered, I feel like it's essential for if you are living with MS. And the way that I would like to phrase it to make this point stronger is that you want someone who is your ally. You want an alliance or a partnership, working with them and taking decisions. And then lastly, the last takeaway point is the cultural competency. Like even if this is a provider that might not be familiar with your culture, or if you're a provider, probably we need to become better to trying to understand and put ourselves in the shoes of our patients. And then if you are a patient, maybe you can share some of your culture, because once people understand some of their some patients' values and beliefs, definitely the relationship will be stronger.
Well, I want to thank you for sharing your expertise with us, Dr. Manrique. I think we have time for one more question from our viewers. And we heard from Brian, who tells us that his anxiety during medical appointments frequently causes him to forget his concerns while he's there. He says that he wishes there was a list he could refer to. Do you have any suggestions that might make Brian's life easier during those medical appointments?
Brian is facing the white coat syndrome. And it's true that healthcare environments can cause a lot of anxiety, and you may forget what was important for you to discuss. So, one strategy could be keeping it simple, and then there is a methodology that we advise patients to use that is called ask 3 questions, and you can better understand what you need to ask. Is about the what, the how, and why. So the first question is probably, what's my main problem? So you're gonna ask your provider, like, what do they think is their biggest, or they're gonna tell them what's their biggest issue and talk about it. And the second one is about the how, is that what do I need to do? And I say how is because probably you're gonna follow steps about what you need to do going next. And finally, is the why is that important to me? So when you're able to understand better why the decisions or the advice that your provider is giving you, then it might be better for you to follow their advice.
Well, I want to thank everyone who submitted some great questions. And thank you again, Dr. Manrique, for being with us today.
Thank you, John. Really appreciate it.
Before we close, I want to remind you that for information and resources on MS, please visit the Society's website. You'll find research updates and news, information on connection programs like self-help groups, and you'll hear about ways to get involved, as well as finding out about upcoming events that are taking place near you. Remember, you can connect with the National MS Society and others affected by MS on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and LinkedIn. And I hope you'll join me every week on the Real Talk MS podcast, where I continue the conversation that we start here. You'll find Real Talk MS at realtalkms.com, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, or wherever you find your favorite podcasts. I'd like to thank Dr. Luis Manrique-Trujillo for joining us today. Please remember that a recording of this webcast will be available at the Society's website at nationalmssociety.org/MSexpert, as well as on Facebook and YouTube. I hope you'll join us at this same time for next week's edition of Ask an MS Expert. You can always find our upcoming program topics on the National MS Society's website. And now I have a favor to ask each of you. Getting your feedback on today's webcast is important. So if you're watching on Facebook Live, you'll see a link to a survey pinned to the comments section. On YouTube, you'll find that link in the program description. And on Twitch, you'll see that link in the chat. Completing the survey makes a real difference. The information you provide helps us continuously improve, and it helps shape future webcasts. The survey takes just 1 minute, so I hope you'll take a minute to fill it out. On behalf of Dr. Luis Manrique-Trujillo and the National MS Society, I want to thank you once again for joining us. Please stay safe and make healthy choices.